Welcome to Office Revenge Hub. Sit back and enjoy today's story.
They took my bonus, $50,000 I had earned, and I ended up making 10 times that without them. My name is Adrian Matthews, and for 4 years I was a top sales director at Pinnacle Tech Solutions, a software company in Austin. I wasn't just good at my job, I was exceptional. I closed deals other people said were impossible. I brought in clients that transformed our revenue. I worked nights and weekends building relationships that made the company millions. I lived and breathed sales. I'd wake up at 6 to catch East Coast clients before their day started. I'd stay on calls until 9 at night for West Coast prospects. My girlfriend Emma used to joke that I was married to my phone. She wasn't entirely wrong, but I believed in what we were selling. Pinnacle made project management software for construction companies. It was genuinely useful. It solved real problems. And I was good at showing companies how our platform could save them money and time. When I started at Pinnacle, we had about 40 clients and $8 million in annual revenue. The company was struggling. The previous sales director had left suddenly, and the pipeline was basically empty. Our CEO, a guy named Martin Green, hired me with big promises. He said if I could turn sales around, I'd be rewarded. Bonuses, equity, partnership opportunities. I took the job because I saw potential. The product was solid. We just needed someone who could sell it properly. I spent my first month doing nothing but research. I studied our competitors. I analyzed why previous deals had failed. I rebuilt our entire pitch from the ground up. Then I started making calls. My first major win was a mid-sized construction firm in Dallas called Brennan & Associates. They'd been looking at 3 different software solutions. I spent 2 months building a relationship with their operations director. I learned everything about their pain points. I customized a demo specifically for their workflow. When I presented, I didn't just show them features. I showed them how our software would solve the exact problems, keeping their ops director up at night. They signed a 3-year contract worth $200,000. Martin was ecstatic. He took me to lunch and told me I was exactly what Pinnacle needed. He said this was just the beginning. He was right. Over the next 18 months, I closed deal after deal. I brought in a major client in Phoenix worth $500,000 over 5 years. I landed 3 clients in California within a 2-month span. I turned our struggling pipeline into a machine that consistently delivered. By the end of my second year, I'd personally brought in over $6 million in new business. Our total revenue had jumped to $22 million. Pinnacle went from barely surviving to genuinely thriving. Martin promoted me to senior sales director. He gave me a team of 4 junior salespeople to mentor. He increased my base salary, and he promised me something specific: a performance bonus structure tied directly to revenue I generated. The bonus plan was straightforward. I'd get 5% of the gross revenue from any new contracts I personally closed. For renewals of my clients, I'd get 2%. It was in writing, signed by both of us, legally binding. That bonus structure changed everything for me. Suddenly, I wasn't just working for a salary. I was building real wealth. Every deal I closed was putting money directly into my future. Emma and I started making plans. We'd been dating for 3 years and living together for 1. We talked about getting married, buying a house, starting a family. The bonus money would make all of that possible much faster than we'd imagined. I worked even harder. I traveled constantly. I missed birthdays and holidays. I postponed a vacation Emma had been planning for months because a major prospect wanted to meet during that week. She was understanding, but I could see it wearing on her. I kept telling myself it would be worth it. Just a few more years of grinding and we'd be set. We could relax, have the life we wanted. But year 3 was my best year yet. I closed 8 major contracts, totaling over $4 million in revenue. I also renewed 5 of my original clients. According to my bonus structure, I'd earned approximately $220,000 in bonuses that year. Martin kept telling me the bonuses would be paid out annually in January after the books were closed for the previous year. He said it was standard accounting practice. I didn't question it. I trusted him. January came. I was expecting a massive payout. I'd calculated everything down to the penny. After taxes, I'd take home about $140,000. Emma and I were going to use it as a down payment on a house. I had a meeting scheduled with Martin and Patricia, our CFO, to discuss the bonus payout. I walked into that conference room excited. I'm ready to celebrate what I'd accomplished. Martin looked uncomfortable. Patricia wouldn't meet my eyes. Martin said they needed to talk to me about the bonus structure. There had been some complications. My stomach dropped. He said Pinnacle's board had reviewed the compensation plan and decided it was too generous. The company was still in a growth phase. They needed to reinvest revenue into product development and hiring. Paying out such large bonuses to individual contributors wasn't sustainable. I said we had a contract, a signed agreement. Martin nodded. He said they'd reviewed it with their attorneys. There was language in the contract about the company reserving the right to modify compensation structures based on business needs. I'd never noticed that clause. Yeah, I'd been so focused on the bonus percentages that I hadn't read the fine print carefully. Patricia jumped in. She said they weren't eliminating my bonus entirely. They were capping it at $50,000 annually, regardless of performance. I sat there processing what they were telling me. I'd earned over $200,000 in bonuses. They were paying me $50,000. They were taking $170,000 that I'd earned. I asked if this was negotiable, if there was any room to discuss this. Martin said the decision was final. The board had voted. He said I should still be grateful. $50,000 was a substantial bonus. Most people in sales would be thrilled, but most people in sales hadn't generated $4 million in new revenue. I asked what would happen going forward. Yeah, Patricia said the new cap would apply to all future bonuses as well. No matter how much revenue I brought in, my bonus would never exceed $50,000 annually. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. They'd fundamentally changed my compensation after I'd already done the work, and they'd structured it so I had no recourse because of some buried clause in the contract. Martin said he understood I was disappointed, but he hoped I'd see this as an investment in Pinnacle's future. The company was growing because of my work. That growth would benefit everyone, including me, in the long run. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and left the room. I sat in my car in the parking lot trying to breathe. I called Emma. I could barely get the words out. She was furious. She said I should sue them, fight this. And they couldn't just steal money I'd earned. But I'd already looked at the contract on my phone. The clause was there, buried in paragraph 7 of a 12-paragraph document. Company reserves the right to modify compensation structures based on operational requirements and board approval. My lawyer would probably tell me I'd signed away my leverage. Emma said I should quit, walk out and find a company that would actually value me. I said I couldn't quit. We needed my salary. We had bills, rent. We were planning to buy a house. I couldn't just walk away from a 6-figure base salary out of pride. Emma was quiet. Then she said she understood, but she could hear in my voice that something had broken. She was right. Something had broken. I went back to work the next day. I smiled at people in the hallway. I took calls with clients. I acted like everything was normal, but inside I was seething. I'd sacrificed everything for Pinnacle. I'd worked 80-hour weeks. I'd missed important moments with family and friends. I'd generated millions in revenue, and they'd repaid me by stealing my bonus. The worst part was Martin's face during that meeting. He hadn't looked guilty or conflicted. He'd looked mildly inconvenienced that he had to have an uncomfortable conversation. I was just a line item to him, a resource to be optimized. The $50,000 bonus hit my account 2 weeks later. I stared at the number on my screen. It was more money than I'd ever received at once before, but all I could think about was the $170,000 they'd kept. I tried to move forward. I told myself to be grateful for what I had. Now, plenty of people would kill for a $50,000 bonus, but every time I closed a deal, I'd calculate what my bonus should have been versus what I'd actually receive. Every contract felt like I was generating wealth for people who'd already proven they'd steal from me. My performance started slipping, not dramatically. I was still good at my job, but the fire was gone. I wasn't staying up late crafting perfect proposals anymore. I wasn't going the extra mile to close difficult deals. Martin noticed. He pulled me aside one day and asked if everything was okay. He said my numbers were down compared to last year. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him exactly why my motivation had tanked, but I just said I was dealing with some personal stuff. I'd get back on track. He patted my shoulder and said he knew I would. He said Pinnacle needed me firing on all cylinders. Pinnacle needed me. But when I'd needed them to honor their commitment, they'd chosen money over integrity. That conversation was the moment something shifted in me. I stopped seeing Pinnacle as my company, the place I was building something meaningful. I started seeing it as a job, a transaction. They wanted my labor. I'd give them exactly what they paid for, nothing more. I started leaving at 5:30 instead of 8. I stopped checking email on weekends. When prospects asked for extra customization or additional meetings, I'd pass them to my junior team members instead of handling everything myself. My numbers dropped further. Martin called me into his office again. This time Patricia was there too. They said they were concerned. My performance had declined significantly over the past quarter. I was on track to miss my targets for the first time since joining the company. I said I was doing my job, meeting my responsibilities. If they had specific concerns about my performance, I'd be happy to discuss them. Martin said it wasn't about meeting minimums. It was about excellence. The Adrian Matthews who'd built this company didn't just meet targets. He exceeded them. I said people change, priorities shift. Patricia asked if I was looking for other opportunities. If I was planning to leave, I said no. I had no plans to leave. That was technically true. I wasn't planning to leave, but I also wasn't planning to stay forever. I just didn't know what else to do yet. The months crawled by. I kept doing adequate work, closing enough deals to justify my salary, but nothing like what I'd accomplished before. Emma noticed the change in me. I was home more, which should have been good, but I was miserable, angry, resentful. She asked me one night why I was still there. If Pinnacle made me this unhappy, why not just find something else? I said it wasn't that simple. Jobs like mine didn't grow on trees. The market was competitive. I couldn't just walk into another 6-figure sales role. Emma said I was one of the best salespeople she'd ever seen. Any company would be lucky to have me, but I didn't believe her. Martin's words had gotten into my head. Maybe I wasn't as good as I'd thought. Maybe that one great year had been luck. Maybe I'd already peaked. I started having panic attacks at night, lying awake calculating how much money I'd lost. Now, how different my life would be if they'd paid me what I'd earned. Emma would wake up and find me on the couch at 3 a.m, staring at spreadsheets on my laptop. She begged me to talk to someone, a therapist, a career coach, anyone. I said I was fine, I just needed time. But I wasn't fine, I was drowning. 6 months after the bonus theft, I was having coffee with an old colleague named Jason. He'd left Pinnacle a year before to start his own consulting firm. Jason asked how things were going. I gave him the generic answer. Things were good, busy, the usual. He looked at me like he knew I was lying. He said he'd heard rumors that Pinnacle had changed their comp structure, cut bonuses for top performers. I was surprised. I asked how he'd heard that. He said one of my junior team members had mentioned it. People talk. As I admitted it was true, they'd capped bonuses at $50,000 regardless of performance. Jason whistled. He said that was brutal, especially for someone like me who'd been bringing in millions. I said it was what it was. Jason leaned forward. He said he wanted to tell me something. When he'd left Pinnacle to start consulting, he'd been terrified. Leaving a steady paycheck felt like jumping off a cliff. But within 6 months, he was making more money than he'd ever made at Pinnacle because he owned his work, his client relationships, his value. He said the best decision he'd ever made was betting on himself instead of waiting for a company to value him properly. I said that sounded great for him, but I wasn't sure I had what it took to go independent. Jason laughed. He said if anyone could do it, I could. I had the skills, the track record, the relationships. I just needed to stop giving all my value to people who didn't appreciate it. That conversation planted a seed. I started thinking about what it would look like to work for myself. I had client relationships. I understood the market. I knew how to sell. But I'd need capital to start. I'd need to build infrastructure. I'd need to figure out healthcare and taxes and all the logistics of running a business. It felt overwhelming. Then I got an email from one of my oldest clients, a construction company in Houston called Redfield Construction. They were expanding and wanted to discuss a major software upgrade. I scheduled a call with their VP of operations, a woman named Sharon, who I'd built a strong relationship with over 3 years. Sharon said they were happy with Pinnacle's software, but they'd been approached by 2 competitors offering more customized solutions. Before they made any decisions, she wanted to talk to me directly. She trusted my judgment. During that call, something clicked for me. Sharon wasn't loyal to Pinnacle. She was loyal to me. I was the one who'd spent hours understanding their needs. I was the one who'd provided support and problem solving beyond what the software did. If I left Pinnacle, Sharon would probably follow my recommendation for whatever solution I suggested. And she wasn't the only one. I had relationships with dozens of clients built over years of genuine service. Those relationships were mine, not Pinnacle's. I started making a list. Every client I'd brought to Pinnacle, every relationship where I was the primary contact, nor every company that valued my expertise over the software brand. It was a long list. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I started having quiet conversations with a few of my most trusted clients. I didn't badmouth Pinnacle. I just asked hypothetical questions. If I were to start an independent consulting firm, helping companies find the right software solutions, would that be something they'd be interested in? The response was overwhelming. Almost every person I talked to said yes. They said they'd been staying with Pinnacle partly because of me. If I was offering the same expertise independently, they'd absolutely work with me. One client, the VP at a company in Denver, said something that sealed my decision. He said he'd never really trusted Pinnacle as a company, but he trusted me. So if I told him a solution was right for his business, he'd believe me. That's when I realized my real value wasn't in selling Pinnacle's software. It was in being a trusted advisor who helped companies make good technology decisions, and I could do that for myself. I spent the next month planning in secret. I researched how to set up an LLC. I talked to an accountant about tax implications. I built a basic business plan. I decided to position myself as an independent software consultant. I wouldn't be tied to any single product. I'd evaluate what companies actually needed and recommend the best solutions, whether that was Pinnacle's software or someone else's. I'd make money through consulting fees and implementation partnerships with various software companies. It was a solid model. And it would let me leverage all the expertise I'd built without being dependent on any single employer. Emma was nervous when I told her my plan. She asked if I was sure, if I'd really thought this through. I showed her the spreadsheet. If I could convert even 25% of my existing client relationships into consulting engagements, I'd match my current salary in the first year. If I could convert 50%, I'd double it, and I wouldn't be capped. Every deal I closed would directly benefit me. Emma looked at the numbers. Then she looked at me. She said I seemed different, more like the person she'd fallen in love with 4 years ago. I realized she was right. For the first time in months, I felt excited instead of angry. I gave Pinnacle my notice 2 weeks later. Martin was shocked. He asked what had changed, where I was going. I said I was starting my own consulting practice. I'd be helping companies evaluate software solutions independently. Martin's face went hard. He asked if I planned to compete with Pinnacle. I said I'd be competing with everyone, including Pinnacle. I'd recommend whatever solution was actually best for each client. Martin said that was a breach of loyalty after everything Pinnacle had done for me. I almost laughed. I asked what exactly Pinnacle had done for me besides steal $170,000 I had earned. Martin said that was a business decision, not personal. I said my leaving was also a business decision, not personal. He asked if I was planning to poach Pinnacle's clients. I said I had relationships with dozens of companies. Those relationships existed because of work I'd done. Now, if those companies chose to work with me independently, that was their decision. Martin threatened legal action. He said I'd signed a non-compete agreement. I'd already had a lawyer review it. The non-compete said I couldn't work for a direct competitor in the same market for 1 year, but it didn't say I couldn't consult independently, and it specifically didn't restrict client relationships I'd built. Martin's lawyer had drafted a bad contract, just like the bonus contract, with the buried modification clause. I told Martin I'd be professional during my transition. I'd document my active deals. I wouldn't sabotage anything, but I was leaving, and there was nothing he could do about it. My last 2 weeks at Pinnacle were tense. Martin barely spoke to me. Patricia avoided me entirely. My junior team members were confused and concerned. I told them the truth. I was starting my own practice because I wanted to control my own future. I encouraged them to think about what they wanted long term. 2 of them asked if I'd hire them eventually. I said maybe. Once I was established, on my last day I cleaned out my desk. No one threw me a party. No one gave a speech. I just packed my things and left. I felt lighter than I had in months. I spent the first week of independence setting up infrastructure, website, email, phone system, basic marketing materials. Then I started reaching out to my network. Not aggressively, just letting people know I was now available for independent consulting. The response was immediate. Sharon from Redfield Construction hired me within 3 days. She said they'd been waiting for me to go independent. They wanted me to evaluate their entire technology stack and make recommendations. She paid me $15,000 for that engagement. A company in Phoenix I'd worked with at Pinnacle hired me to help them evaluate alternatives to Pinnacle's software. They'd been frustrated with customer service and wanted to know what else was available. I did a thorough assessment. I actually recommended they stay with Pinnacle for now, but negotiate better service terms. They appreciated the honest advice and paid me $12,000 for the consultation. Within my first month, I'd made $38,000. Within 3 months, I'd made over $120,000. I was on track to double my Pinnacle salary in my first year of independence. But the real win wasn't just the money, it was the freedom. I worked with clients I genuinely liked. I gave advice I actually believed in. I built my schedule around my life instead of the other way around. Emma and I started having dinner together every night. I coached a youth soccer team on weekends. I took a full week off for the first time in years without checking email. I was building the life I'd always said I wanted, but never prioritized. 6 months after leaving Pinnacle, I ran into Patricia at a conference. She looked uncomfortable when she saw me. I said hello politely. Asked how things were going at Pinnacle. She said they were fine, busy. I asked how my old territory was performing. She said they'd hired 2 people to replace me. The numbers were okay, but not great. I didn't gloat, I just nodded. Patricia asked how my consulting practice was going. I said it was going well, exceeding my expectations. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said she'd heard I was working with several former Pinnacle clients. I said yes. Companies I'd built relationships with over years were now consulting clients. Patricia said Martin was angry about it. He felt betrayed. I almost laughed. I said Martin should understand business decisions aren't personal. Patricia looked away. She said quietly that the bonus decision had been controversial internally. She'd argued against the cap, but Martin and the board had overruled her. I said I appreciated her telling me that, but it didn't change anything. She nodded. Then she said something surprising. She said watching me leave and succeed had made her think about her own situation. She'd been CFO at Pinnacle for 8 years. She'd helped build the company, but she had no equity, no ownership, just a salary. She was starting to wonder if she was making the same mistake I'd made, giving her best years to someone else's vision. I gave her my card. I said if she ever wanted to talk about alternatives, I'd be happy to share what I'd learned. 3 months later, Patricia left Pinnacle. She joined a startup as CFO with significant equity. I heard through the grapevine that Martin was furious. Losing both his top salesperson and his CFO within a year had created real problems for the company. I didn't feel bad for him. He'd created those problems by valuing short-term profit over long-term relationships. 1 year after leaving Pinnacle, I got a cold email from one of the junior salespeople I'd mentored. Her name was Rebecca. She said she'd been thinking about leaving for months. Pinnacle had changed since I left. The culture was toxic. Martin was paranoid about people leaving. He'd actually added stricter non-compete clauses to everyone's contracts. Rebecca asked if I had room to bring on an associate. She wanted to learn the independent consulting model. I met her for coffee. She was smart, hungry, and genuinely good at understanding client needs. I offered her a contract position. She'd work on a commission basis, earning a percentage of any deals she brought in or helped close. Rebecca accepted immediately. Within 6 months, Rebecca had brought in 5 new clients. Our combined revenue was approaching $500,000 annually. I started getting referrals from people I'd never worked with before. My reputation as an honest, client-focused consultant was spreading. I raised my rates, then I raised them again. Clients kept saying yes because I delivered results. 18 months after leaving Pinnacle, I was making over $400,000 annually, more than double what I'd made at Pinnacle even in my best year. And I was actually working fewer hours. I bought the house Emma and I had been dreaming about. We got married in our backyard with close friends and family. We started trying for a baby. I'd built the life Pinnacle had promised, but never delivered. Then I got a call that brought everything full circle. Sharon from Redfield Construction was on the line. She said her company was expanding aggressively. They'd acquired 2 smaller construction firms and were integrating operations. They needed serious help with technology strategy and implementation. It was a 6-month project worth at least $200,000, but Sharon said there was a complication. Redfield's board had been approached by Pinnacle. Martin had offered them a special deal. discounted software, and free implementation if they'd sign a multi-year contract. Martin was trying to win back a client I'd brought him originally. Sharon said the board was considering it because of the cost savings, but she wanted to know what I thought. I asked her to give me 48 hours. I'd put together a comprehensive proposal. I spent those 2 days building the most detailed technology strategy I'd ever created. I didn't just recommend software. Now I designed an entire integration plan that would unify Redfield's acquired companies into a single operational system. I showed them how my approach would save them money long term, even if it cost more upfront. I demonstrated how Pinnacle's discounted offer was actually more expensive over 5 years when you factored in limitations and upgrade costs. I presented to Redfield's entire board. Martin wasn't there, but I knew he'd hear about it. The board asked tough questions. I answered every single one. I didn't badmouth Pinnacle. I just showed them objectively why my recommendation was better for their specific needs. 3 days later, Sharon called. The board had voted they were going with my proposal. She said one board member had actually said hiring me was the easiest decision they'd made all year because I clearly cared more about their success than about making a sale. That was the moment I realized I'd won. Not just the deal. The whole thing. Pinnacle had tried to undercut me by offering discounts, but they couldn't compete with genuine relationships and expertise. I'd built something they couldn't steal from me. The Redfield project was massive. It stretched to 8 months and ended up being worth $280,000. I hired 2 more contractors to help deliver it. We did exceptional work. Redfield's integration went smoothly. Their operations director told me we'd saved them at least $1 million in efficiency gains. They referred me to 3 other construction companies. Each of those became clients. 2 years after leaving Pinnacle, my consulting firm was generating over $700,000 in annual revenue. I had a team of 4 contractors. We were selective about who we worked with. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined, but more importantly, I was doing work I believed in with people I respected. Emma gave birth to our daughter, Sophie. I took 6 weeks off to be home with them because I owned my time. That's when I realized the real revenge wasn't just financial, it was freedom. Pinnacle had tried to control me through compensation structures and contracts. They'd wanted me dependent and grateful. Now I was independent and thriving. I heard through my network that Pinnacle was struggling. They'd lost several major clients. Their growth had stalled. And Martin had brought in a new sales director who was competent but couldn't replicate the results I'd generated. The company wasn't failing, but it wasn't thriving either. Meanwhile, I kept growing. 3 years after leaving, I was invited to speak at a sales conference about building a consulting practice. I almost declined. Public speaking wasn't really my thing, but Emma convinced me it was important to share what I'd learned. I prepared a talk about transitioning from corporate sales to independent consulting. I told my story honestly. The bonus theft, the betrayal, the fear of going independent, and the freedom and success that came from betting on myself. The room was packed. People took notes. After my talk, dozens of people came up to ask questions. Many of them had similar stories. Companies that had changed compensation structures, bosses who'd stolen credit for their work, systems that devalued their contributions. They asked the same question Emma had asked me years ago. How did you know it was time to leave? I said, you know it's time when you realize the system is designed to extract your value without rewarding it fairly, when loyalty becomes exploitation. Some people said they were too afraid to leave. They had mortgages, kids, responsibilities. I understood. I'd felt that fear. But I told them fear of the unknown is usually worse than the unknown itself. Most of the nightmare scenarios we imagine never happen. What actually happens is you discover capabilities you didn't know you had. You build things you never thought possible. One young woman came up after everyone else had left. Now, she said she'd been working in tech sales for a company that kept changing her commission structure. Every time she had a good quarter, they'd modify the terms to pay her less. She asked if I thought she could make it independently. I asked if she was good at her job. She said yes. I asked if she had client relationships. She said yes. I told her she already had everything she needed. The only question was whether she believed it. She emailed me 6 months later. She'd left her company and started consulting. She'd made more in 4 months than she'd made in a full year at her old job. She thanked me for giving her permission to bet on herself. I told her I didn't give her permission. She'd always had it. She just needed to claim it. That became my mission. Not just building my own practice, but helping other people escape systems designed to undervalue them. I started mentoring sales professionals who wanted to go independent. I created a course teaching people how to transition from corporate roles to consulting practices. I charged for the course because I knew people needed to invest in themselves to take it seriously. But I also offered scholarships to people who couldn't afford it. Dozens of people went through the program. Most of them succeeded. Some failed and went back to corporate jobs. But everyone who tried learned something valuable about their own capabilities. 4 years after leaving Pinnacle, I sold a minority stake in my consulting firm to a private equity group that specialized in professional services. They valued the company at $3 million. I retained majority ownership and operational control. But I had capital to expand and the experienced partners to help me scale. We hired full-time employees. We opened a small office. We formalized our training programs. My consulting firm became a real company, and I made sure we treated people the way Pinnacle should have treated me. We paid fair bonuses. We gave people equity. We honored our commitments. Several of my employees had left toxic corporate environments similar to what I'd experienced. They'd been undervalued and exploited. Now they were thriving. One of them said working for my firm had restored his faith that businesses could actually care about people. That meant more to me than any financial success. 5 years after the bonus theft, I was having dinner with Emma at a nice restaurant downtown. We were celebrating our anniversary. A man approached our table. It took me a second to recognize him. It was Martin. He looked older, tired. He asked if he could talk to me for a minute. Emma's eyes went hard. She didn't like Martin. She never had. I said he could have 1 minute. Martin said he'd heard about my success. He said he was impressed with what I'd built. I didn't respond. I just waited. He said Pinnacle was going through some challenges. They were exploring strategic options. He wondered if I'd be interested in consulting for them, helping turn around their sales operation. I almost laughed. I asked why he thought I'd help the company that had stolen from me. Martin said that was ancient history, water under the bridge. We were both professionals. This would be a lucrative engagement. I looked at him for a long moment. I thought about all the anger I'd carried for years, all the resentment and betrayal. Then I realized I didn't feel any of it anymore. I just felt indifferent. I said no thank you. I had more work than I could handle with clients who actually valued my contributions. Martin said he'd pay premium rates, whatever it took. I said it wasn't about money. I just wasn't interested in working with people I didn't respect. Martin's face went red. He started to say something angry. Emma cut him off. She said our anniversary dinner wasn't the time for this conversation. She asked him to leave. Martin looked at me one more time. I saw something in his eyes. Maybe regret, maybe just frustration that he couldn't get what he wanted. He walked away. Emma asked if I was okay. I realized I was more than okay. Yeah, I'd just turned down the person who'd once had complete power over my career. And it had felt effortless. That's when I knew I'd fully moved past what Pinnacle had done to me. Today, my consulting firm generates over $2 million in annual revenue. I have 12 employees. We work with companies across the country. I still remember exactly how much Pinnacle stole from me. $170,000. My firm made that much in the last 6 weeks. But the real win isn't the money, it's the knowledge that I built something they can't touch, something that belongs entirely to me. Martin took my bonus, but he accidentally gave me something more valuable. He freed me from believing I needed his approval or validation. He showed me that loyalty to broken systems is just another form of self-betrayal. I teach that lesson to everyone who works with me now. Your value isn't determined by what a company pays you. It's determined by what you're willing to demand and build for yourself. Some people hear that and feel empowered. Some people hear it and stay in comfortable mediocrity. I understand both responses. But I also know which group builds the lives they actually want. My daughter Sophie is 3 now. She doesn't know anything about Pinnacle or bonus theft or corporate betrayal. What she knows is that her dad is home for dinner every night, that he comes to her preschool events, that he takes her to the park on weekday afternoons because he controls his own schedule. That's the life I built on the other side of betrayal. Sometimes Emma asks me if I ever regret what happened. Why, if I wish Pinnacle had just paid me fairly so I could have stayed and avoided all the stress of going independent. I always say no, because staying would have meant accepting that my value was whatever they decided to pay me. It would have meant teaching myself that betrayal was acceptable as long as the salary was decent. Leaving meant learning that my value was whatever I was willing to create and claim. That lesson was worth more than any bonus. I still see former Pinnacle people occasionally. Some of them congratulate me on my success. Some of them ask for advice about their own careers. I help when I can. I don't hold grudges against people who are just trying to survive in a broken system. But I also don't pretend Pinnacle was anything other than what it was. A company that extracted value from people and discarded them when it was convenient. Martin is still CEO. The company still exists. They're profitable enough to survive, but not growing. They became exactly what they deserved to be, mediocre. My firm became what I decided to build, exceptional. That's the difference between what happens to you and what you choose to create. Pinnacle happened to me. My consulting firm is what I chose to create. One was a lesson, the other is a legacy. If you've ever been betrayed at work, you're not alone. Where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe to Office Revenge Hub for more powerful workplace revenge stories.